Start the report.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular HARC meeting of June 18th at Rebecca Hall as a hybrid meeting. Before we get started, just to recognize there was a site walk held today at 3 p.m. June 18th at 5RA20 ETA. And during the site walk, we only had discussions, if any, related to location orientation and materials of the shed that is the subject of a challenge of evaluation. Public hearing to be held at 5:30 on this date. Present were Mark Shambaugh, Stacy Lake, Bob Mather, Elitza, Kristen, and Jennifer Winter, the applicant. So with that, just a reminder, the purpose of HARC is to preserve, maintain, and enhance the historic character, scale, architectural integrity, and cultural resources of the town. Present from town council is Elena, staff, Kristen, Piper, Alley. Is there anybody online that I missed? And we'll do the board roll call. Kieran?
Kieran Lannon.
Stacy Lake, Matt Lee,
Bob Mather.
Andrew Williamson.
Elitza Moldova.
Okay, welcome, everybody. Do we have a motion for approval of the minutes of our May 21st?
I wasn't there.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Marco second. Kieran?
Kieran, yes.
Stacy, yes. Matt, yes.
Mark, yes.
Bob, yes.
Very good. And I will move to approve the chair meeting minutes of May 23rd as written. Staff updates, Kristen?
Certainly. So for the 2025 Preservation Awards, the original deadline for submissions was June 12th. We made the decision to extend that deadline 2 weeks to June 26th. So applications are still being received. Thus far, we've received 4 applications. We are doing, outreach pushes to engage more people in submitting applications, and hopeful that all of you will also encourage those to submit for the awards this year. So I'll give you an update at the next meeting. Additional updates, the comprehensive plan. The first in-person community engagement sessions will be taking place from July 21st to July 24th. I will be reaching out to HARC to find a time, a 1.5-hour block, where you will meet with Logan Simpson, our consulting team, they will engage you in questions and a facilitated discussion so that they hear your priorities and input as part of the initial engagement and data collection input piece. And so I will follow up after this meeting with that poll to find a good time within those days. In addition, the beginning of the week, I will send you a schedule. We're finalizing it right now. There will be a big community kickoff, so a big community engagement session you might be interested in engaging in individually, in addition to the HARC stakeholder engagement session. So more on that soon.
What month might we be?
This is taking place. They will be here on site for 4 days from July 21st to July 24th. And so I'd be looking to find a time, preferably on the 22nd or the 23rd, for 1.5 hours to engage as many of you or all of you as possible with the consulting team.
21st to the
To the 24th.
24th. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Those are my updates.
Just for our monthly progress, the number of projects in the backlog
Yeah.
that are coming at us, just so we can see. They have one public hearing project tonight.
Absolutely. So we are pleased to report that we caught ourselves up with the long meetings we had the past few. And so we didn't have a need to add more to the agenda this evening. For July, there are a number of continuances to date certain, which is the July public hearing, and there will likely be 2 projects in addition to those continued projects.
2 continuances, I think. Two.
And then 2 additional. So we're right on top of things. We've also been working through a large volume of insubstantial applications that are subject to administrative review on the staff side as well. So
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Great.
Okay, any public comment on non-agenda items this evening? Non-agenda? See anybody out there?
No hands raised.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on. So we have one public hearing item. It's the challenge of evaluation for Telluride Historic and Architectural Survey, Design Structure 5A20 ETA. It's a public hearing on request to challenge the designation of a shed located at that same address, Land Use Code 7403. Legal description is lot 5RA, Block 20, East Telluride addition to the town of Telluride. Accessory to the plat amendment REC 325, 2025 at 48861 stuff. Address is 5RA 20, address to be determined. Zone district is residential. Owners and the applicant, Pancho and Jennifer Winter, who are here, and staff member Christian Cloutier.
Great. And I just put the public hearing process slide up just for the public to see. I don't know if you want to
Thank you.
cover that, Mark?
As a reminder, just this will be brief this evening, but not a big public gathering so far. The chair will introduce the project, staff gives the presentation and answers HARC's questions, and the applicant gives their presentation, which we asked be less than 30 minutes, and then answers HARC's questions. Then the public is invited to make comments, and we ask for 3 minutes or less per person. If you have the same comment to make, in fairness to everybody, and give enough time to just say that you agree with that, and rather than repeat, please. The applicant may address any comments made by the public, and then that public comment ends and HARC deliberates and votes. So that's the process, and we're ready for the first one, Kristen.
Sure. Sorry about that. That slide was in, anyways, this is the challenge of evaluation for, hang on one moment. Let me set this up for, sorry about this. My screen is showing me different things than you're seeing. This is the challenge of evaluation for a designated structure through the Telluride Historic and Architectural Survey, 5RA20 ETA.
Progress.
Sorry. I had that turned off. Okay, we're good.
Sure. So, so this is the public hearing on that request to challenge the designation. The owner applicant is Pancho and Jennifer Winter. I am going to just quickly remind us of the procedure for a challenge of evaluation because we infrequently see these, just so everyone knows, in the public is informed. It's outlined in section 7403 of the Telluride Land Use Code. A challenge of evaluation letter was initiated by Pancho and Jennifer Winter on 4/16/25 for lot 5RA block 20 ETA per Land Use Code 7403A. Following a request to challenge an evaluation, HARC must hold a public hearing and schedule a site visit prior to the meeting per Land Use Code section 7403C. So we did hold that site visit, as Mark mentioned, at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Per mutual agreement, the applicant agreed to this item coming before you this evening, and the item was properly noticed. So per Land Use Code section 7403D, the person challenging a designation shall have the burden of presenting evidence substantiating the challenge. The staff or any interested citizen may also present evidence as to why the evaluation of the structure should or should not be changed. At the public hearing, staff or any interested citizen may also present additional evidence within 15 days after the date of the public hearing, but most likely this evening. HARC shall make a recommendation to the town council on whether or not to amend the evaluation based on the criteria set forth for evaluation of structures in the 2013 THAS. And per 7403E, following HARC's recommendation, town council is required to hold a meeting to discuss the proposed evaluation modification. And so it is on the agenda for July 22nd town council. And then finally, within 30 days of that, town council will make their decision via resolution on whether or not to amend the evaluation based on the criteria set forth for evaluation of structures in the THAS. I just want to make sure I go over the process so that we follow it appropriately, again, because this is infrequent. So you have all reviewed the materials in the application packet. A number of you came out on the site visit as well. As stated in the challenge of evaluation letter submitted by the applicants, this is a structure that was built in 2001. It is a shed that was erroneously designated in the 2013 THAS. We are not planning to update our survey this year, and so that would be the other opportunity to review and update designations. In this case, we're moving forward with this public hearing. I did review the files. We do show the request to construct the shed, which was received June 20, 2001, and we have the paperwork backing that up. So I think this one is fairly straightforward, and I don't have much detail to provide except for that the shed is newly constructed within the last 25 years. And so the proposed motion is to move to recommend to town council that the evaluation be amended to remove the non-contributing with qualifications designation as identified in the 2013 Telluride Historic and Architectural Survey for the shed located at 5RA 20 ETA based on the criteria set forth for evaluation of structures in the 2013 THAS and the evidence and testimony you will hear this evening with notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code. So that's the staff recommendation. The applicant will present their case for why that designation should be removed. Thank you.
Any questions for Kristen? Okay, come on up and read your name into the mic, and seems to be very straightforward, but tell us what you'd like.
Hi, my name is Pancho Winter, and Jennifer and I own lot 5RA, and we built the shed in 2001, and we did try to make it look so that it would fit into the neighborhood and put license plates on it. So we understand the confusion in 2013 when the Telluride Historical Architectural Survey designated the shed to be a NQWR, and we're wanting to just get that corrected. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Well, I just have a quick question, because all I know about the shed is your letter, your application, the 2 photographs, and then obviously the site visit we wanted to. This didn't replace something else that was there before, or it wasn't just a substantial remodel of something existing. This was built brand new.
Yeah, no, sorry. I don't think there was ever a historic shed that was on that property.
I mean, like I said, the picture looks like brand new construction to me, but
Well,
I'm just-
Lance would know if there was an older shed. I heard Lance say something about there being a shed somewhere in that vicinity, but I don't believe that on that lot at that location there was ever any historic shed,
Okay, thanks.
any shed.
All right. Any questions for the applicant? Not, we'll hear from the public. Does the public have any questions or comments, or should say comments?
You might remind people to raise their hand.
And so if you're out there, please electronically raise your hand if you'd like to comment on this project.
There are no hands raised.
Okay, so are there any deliberations? I mean, it was a mistake, so if you'd like to pass this down to one of the alternates, we'll be inclusive and see which one wants to make the motion tonight.
Can I?
Lisa, here we go.
Yeah, it's the first time ever.
Okay.
That's a biggie too.
We're all behind you.
All right.
Go for it.
I move to recommend to town council that the evaluation be amended to remove the non-contributing with qualifications designation as identified in the 2013 Telluride Historic and Architectural Survey, THAS, for the shed located at 5RA 20 ETA based on the criteria set forth for the evaluation of structures in the 2013 THAS and the evidence and testimony provided at the public hearing held on June 18th, 2025, with notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code.
I'll second that.
Excellent. Kiernan,
Kiernan, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Matt, yes.
Mark, yes?
Bob, yes.
Good job. Our final project of the evening is a work session on Project L, Parking Facility, Affordable Housing, consideration application for a work session for new construction of an intercept parking facility with affordable housing, commercial and child care uses pursuant to Land Use Code 5201C. Legal description, Lot L by village according to the plat, Block 1 PG, page 328 and replat 13096, Block 191 of lots J and L, dedication Block 483, page 733, continued 4.07 AC. Address is 860 Black Bear Road. Accommodations 2 is the zone district. Owner is Town of Telluride. Applicant Cushing Terrell. Staff member Kristen Clothier.
Thank you, Mark. So again, this is consideration of an application for this work session for new construction of an intercept parking facility with affordable housing, commercial and childcare uses. It's in the accommodations 2 zone district and in the accommodations treatment area. It's not located within the Telluride Historic Landmark District, and there are no rated structures in the immediate vicinity. The existing land use of the site is primarily a large paved parking lot. So this is the location that we are focusing on this evening, Lot L. A project overview. This HARC work session is an opportunity for a preliminary conversation with HARC regarding potential new construction of this intercept parking facility with affordable housing, commercial and childcare uses proposed for Lot L. The proposed project is in the preliminary conceptual design phase, and the applicant is seeking guidance from HARC prior to taking any next steps towards preparing a formal HARC application. I'm going to provide you with some project background and context. You have a lot of additional details in the memo provided prior, but just to put these forth during the public hearing, Telluride Town Council initiated a conceptual planning process in 2019 to determine how best to utilize several parcels owned by the town of Telluride and the Telluride Housing Authority in the southwest part of town. The parcels are generally south of the San Miguel River and west of Davis Street. The Southwest Area Conceptual Plan adopted in 2021 identified land use approaches and opportunities for these publicly owned parcels, the surrounding streets, and pedestrian network. And the intent of this work session is to discuss the concept for this potential new structure with affordable housing, parking facility, commercial childcare uses, specifically on the town-owned Lot L, located at 860 Black Bear Road. The concept is based on recommendations from the Southwest Area Conceptual Plan and further developed in the Lot L feasibility study and concept plan in 2022. So the goals for the Lot L from the Southwest Area Plan, just to frame the project. This planning process identified the following goals for Lot L: multi-level parking structure to increase intercept parking for commuters, provide transit-oriented uses proximate to parking, and establish a new local regional transit hub. The new parking structure would provide 300 plus new commuter spaces, in addition to the current number of Lot L spaces, which are 330 plus or minus, and the relocated spaces from Carhenge, 288 plus spaces. So in addition, approximately 35 to 45 resident occupied affordable and employee units wrapping along the north and south facades of the parking structure. Parking for new resident units would be incorporated into the structure itself. In addition, a childcare facility and associated outdoor play area. In addition, approximately 5,000 to 10,000 square feet of ground floor commercial uses and a new local regional transit hub located at the northeastern portion of Lot L, which is incorporated into the parking structure, and Shandoka bike parking and waste and potentially maintenance shop space. And finally, amenities such as playgrounds, pocket parks, and public spaces. So land use code compliance, a formal land use code compliance review will take place following the submission of a complete formal HARC application. So prior to this work session, staff reviewed land use code requirements with the applicant specific to the accommodations to zone district in depth to ensure the applicant is taking land use code requirements constraints into account at this preliminary conceptual stage of project design. And so we're going to focus this evening on the design guidelines. As you know, reminder for overall precepts, keep it simple, keep it in scale, respect the historic resources, make all new design compatible to the existing context. And again, we are located in the accommodations, River Park Corridor overlay, and exterior and site lighting standards and guidelines sections in terms of what I will present to you. And for this work session, as for all work sessions, on this proposed project, while it is still in the preliminary conceptual design phase, the aim is to really focus on the design guidelines that are particularly pertinent at this early stage of project design. I provided in the staff memo the most relevant specific design guidelines, and it's more extensive. I covered a number there just so you would have the opportunity to reflect on some of the higher, most relevant design guidelines prior to coming into this meeting. I now am just going to touch topically on some of those that I think it will be important for you to consider. And then the applicant will present the project itself, and you will be thinking through during the work session the application of those design guidelines. So here are the key Town of Telluride design guidelines for work session discussion. Again, I'm giving you a very high level quick review. I want you to have time to hear from the applicant and then also to really focus on the work session discussion. So overall, we're in the accommodations treatment area. In the introduction for that treatment area, per the design guidelines, a mix of uses is allowed. Projects may include both residential and commercial uses. Many parcels have been developed as individual projects with separate identities, so these have not established an overall sense of visual continuity at this time. Even though a general visual continuity with the older parts of town is desired, this may be balanced in this treatment area with natural constraints and some variety in building character. Whenever feasible, established characteristics of site orientation and street layout found in the historic residential areas of Telluride should also be expressed in the accommodations treatment area. And this, as noted in the design guidelines, is especially important for projects on large parcels such as this one. This is quite a large parcel that may have a substantial impact on the area, and therefore special care should be taken when designing the project to ensure that it is visually integrated in mass scale and character with the neighborhood and the town. And also noted in the design guidelines, as seen from a distance, the accommodations treatment area should appear to be a part of the community with essentially the same perceived street and alley arrangements, building forms, and scale of development. This is particularly important for projects on large parcels and that span several parcels. And more variety in architectural design is appropriate than in other areas, but should maintain visual continuity with the historic district. So that's just the overview of this treatment area and sort of the flexibility within it. Again, I'm not going to go one by one through what I put in the memo. I'm just going to flag topics and some key points just to make them fresh in your mind for coming into the work session. So within the design guidelines, the parking design section notes that parking facilities should be located such that they are subordinate to other site features. An on-site parking area should be located inside or behind a building where its visual impacts will be minimized unless site conditions such as steep slopes prevent this arrangement. The guidelines note that screening a parking area from view from the public right-of-way with site features such as plantings, fences, and walls is important. For structured parking, provide decorative screens or develop rooms in front of the parking area for human occupancy with activities visible to the street. So thinking through building form, I'm just pulling out some key points that relate to this evening's discussion. Use building forms that are similar to those found historically. Simple rectangular shapes should predominate. Buildings should have vertical proportions. Break up larger buildings into subordinate elements to reduce its apparent size, especially for buildings on large parcels. Provide articulation in the wall planes to break up mass and scale. For architectural character, some key design guidelines. New interpretations of traditional building styles are encouraged. New designs shall draw upon the fundamental traits of historic buildings without copying them. This will allow them to be seen as products of their own time, yet compatible with their historic neighbors. Applying highly ornamental details that were not a part of building a Telluride is inappropriate. And building setbacks. Setbacks to large buildings should be varied and should be treated as positive open space, amenities to be enjoyed by pedestrians. So those are a few, and now I'm going to get into just a handful more, and then sort of big picture items. Relationship to the town grid. I said this at the very beginning, respect the established town grid in all projects. Pedestrian scale. Develop the ground floor level of all projects to encourage pedestrian activity. Provide amenities that will encourage pedestrian activity through the area. Mini parks are encouraged to enhance the pedestrian experience. Provide visual interest on all facades and elevations that will be seen from streets, alleys, and pedestrian ways. And importantly, buildings should express human scale through materials and forms that are familiar building elements in town. Use native plantings, rock walls, fences, and other landscape design elements that provide scale, color, and texture and maintain a human scale. A few others before I get to mass and scale more broadly, and that will be the last one I will bring forth. Views. The guidelines include positioning a new building or addition so that the public view corridors are preserved, and to maintain spacing between buildings that respects existing views, open spaces, and solar access. And notes that views through private property are not insured or protected. For positive open space, create places with distinct identity within projects, connect open spaces among large projects, provide positive open space within a project, and provide open space in commercial projects that would be perceived as a public amenity. So those are some of the guidelines that very closely apply to this project and that are very important for consideration. And I'm going to wrap up just by reflecting on the mass and scale guidelines that are very applicable to this discussion. Use building sizes that will appear to be similar in scale to those found historically in town. And at the western gateway into town, which this is in that space, buildings should appear to be smaller in scale with the town, which is generally a variety of 1 and 2 stories, but a 3rd story may be considered as if it is set back from the street and alley. The heights of buildings should vary, but may increase closer to the mountains. A primary building facade should not exceed 50 feet in width without a significant setback. And we kind of go through the primary facades that exceed the 15 feet should be differentiated, as you know, by significant setbacks in the wall plane, creating positive open space in these setbacks such that they will enhance the streetscape. Again, the emphasis is on variations in facade treatment, continuing those through the structure, through the roof line and rear facades, such that the composition appears to be a collection of smaller buildings. For building heights on larger projects, the guidelines state that there should be a variety, including some 1 and 2 story elements at the sidewalk and alley edges. And noting large lots should be developed with several buildings rather than a single structure to help reduce the perceived scale of the project. And the area between the buildings should contribute to the overall positive open space of the site. So some of these are very similar to each other, but it just gives you that emphasis. Again, the facade being similar in dimension to historic. It provides some guidance on the widths that are appropriate. Same goes for commercial and widths that are historic and recommended in terms of mass and scale, similar to residential or commercial throughout town. And recommendation for a larger building to be divided into modules that reflect the traditional scale of construction. And we've talked about, significant architectural changes throughout the entire building. Stepping down the mass of larger buildings to maintain them and to minimize the perceived scale at the street. Historic proportions and building elements in scale with the overall mass of the building. The other overlay that applies to this project that of course we'll get into much more depth with all of these during the formal HARC review when a formal application is submitted, but this being a work session, I'm just going to flag a few within the River Park Corridor overlay. The architectural character is noted to provide the same attention to detail on facades that face the river trail as those that face the street. This project faces the river trail. Mass, scale, and form, the articulation is emphasized there as well. to break up the perceived mass and scale of larger buildings, taller buildings, setback to minimize impacts to the trail, views, positioning the buildings and features in a way that protects, enhances, and highlights views to peaks, waterfalls, the river, creeks, and other important features, provide views through the site to the River Creek, and protect views along the River Trail and the River Creek corridors. And finally, positive open space, providing substantial open space within projects that will enhance the natural character of the area. I'm flagging these because the applicant is going to share with you some of those preliminary conceptual designs, and I just want these particular elements to be top of mind. And again, there's much more detail in the staff memo for reference for you. But you can, as you look through what the applicant presents, be thinking about, as you always do, whether they are, consistent with and coming into compliance with the key design guidelines that apply to the project. I do want to remind HARC that the focus this evening, while there is a Southwest area conceptual plan that is broad, this work session is very focused on Lot L specifically and to the role of HARC and your purview within that review. So finally, your requested action at a work session is to provide general feedback on the information options presented by the applicant in this preliminary conceptual design phase. And your review this evening at the work session is not intended to vest the applicant or public with any reliance as to the outcome of the formal development review process per Land Use Code Section 5201C5. I'm going to end here. The applicant will present the project rather than me presenting the project, and then I'm available, of course, for any questions that you may have later in this discussion.
I just have one question, and that is,
Sure.
how many meetings did you have with the applicant to try to guide them into compliance? And you've enumerated all the relevant guidelines, but that's not what they've drawn even, and it's just preliminary. But
Certainly.
how many meetings did you have to try to guide them?
Certainly. So I can speak to that. So I can say staff in other departments also have been meeting with the applicant more than I have, in particular 2 staff, and then myself. I have met with the applicant. I'm hoping I'm going to get the number right at once initially to give a very high level review of land use code, relevant land use code compliance items, as well as relevant design guidelines in depth. And I presented those to the applicant and then met maybe 2 or 3 times along the way to give additional feedback, which it was, the applicant's, decision how to incorporate that feedback into the project. I'm not providing my recommendations or, during this meeting because it's a work session for HARC. But when we come into the formal review process, I, of course, will provide a staff memo that provides an analysis and recommendations. But I can say that the project in those meetings that I've had to respond to your question, Mark, has already evolved, how to say it, not the project, but like the work that the applicant has been doing to arrive at this work session has been an evolution, and they are going to present this evening where they are to date, which is again at the very preliminary conceptual design phase. So I was just asked to give some high level input into that
Okay.
exercise before coming here.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, well, we'll hear from the applicant. Come
I've
on
got-
up.
I've got one
Oh,
question. Kristen, can you tell us how many levels above grade this project is?
How many?
Levels or stories?
I'm going to have the applicant speak to that. They're going to give you a much more extensive review. They actually have an updated slide deck versus what was in the packet that will be added to the document center following this meeting that they just provided today. And so I'm going to let them kind of run through that with you and make sure it's the most updated information.
Anybody else? No. Yeah. Okay, come on up and,
But everyone's online.
oh, they're online. Okay.
And I think the only final thing, applicant, if you aren't going to speak to this, I will just bring you back to the very beginning of my presentation and what their charge was. I kind of walked you through those big picture plans. The applicant may speak to that as well, but I just wanted to reiterate that.
And again, to help the applicant, brevity, we're really going to focus on mass and scale, as you know. And with the guidelines she just presented, we'd love to hear how you think you're complying with those and or what you're going to do differently if you're not. That would be most helpful. And then at the end, we'll try to recap whatever our summary is to give some guidance. So, and thank you, doing a work session, complicated project, controversial project, already from these piles of letters we're getting from the public. So thanks for doing the work session.
Well,
Oh.
we absolutely appreciate the opportunity to do this. Kristen, are we set up to screen share?
Yes, you are.
Perfect. Then Charlie, if you want to take us away. Just introducing our team briefly. I'm joined by Randy Rhodes and Charlie Deese. The three of us are all architects with Cushing Terrell. And I'm going to kind of kick us off, and Charlie will step us through the design, and then really are looking forward to that discussion. So jumping in, again, Kristen, really appreciate you teeing this up because this project this project does have quite a bit of background. And so as you noted, this was identified in the 2019 Southwest Area Conceptual Plan, which really did draw on those community goals, objectives, and policies identified in the 2006 adoption of the master plan. And it really did identify the town-owned parcel Lot L as a lot to address the town's goals for providing intercept parking, encourage transit ridership, and lowering those vehicle miles traveled. In 22, our team was engaged to do the feasibility study, visualizing these uses that were identified and frankly, kind of ground truthing the program. Can it fit? And studies did show that it can fit here. And at that time, a round of community engagement and feedback was done at that time. So now we're here today to discuss how does it fit? And we do look forward to your feedback. So we're going to briefly show some precedent imagery for materiality and context, really showing that, also showing the feasibility study of where it was left off. And so showing some of that evolution into where we are at today. And then Charlie will talk about those tools, mass and scale, and all of those pieces Kristen outlined for us for the how do we fit a parking garage into this neighborhood. Keep it fairly short and get to your feedback. With that, Charlie, can you give me the next slide? So we did pull up some character imagery. This is some precedent for materiality and context, showing some of this, really giving a little more character to the rendered images that follow. Obviously, we're still very much in a conceptual design piece. So this is drawing on the materials that are found within the neighborhood, some of the scales and massing approach found in the adjacent residential structures, and really wanting to double down on the opportunity to provide landscaping, both at streetscapes, at the pocket park, and in preserving the berm along River Trail, and really looking at the opportunity to incorporate landscaping and green materiality into the vertical structure itself. Can you give me the next slide, please? So the feasibility study, this is where it was left off in 2022. And this exercise showed that the program could fit. We heard during outreach that the potential uses that you can see sort of identified floating out there in the green space were important. Were important to the neighborhood. And those uses were not incorporated into that plan. Overall, you can see the footprint was very large. It effectively went streetscape up to the berm. And even with that large footprint, it didn't really address the streetscape. It did not yet include that wish list of items floating out there currently in the green space. And it did fall a little bit short of the targeted housing count. So that is where we left off and are now charged with how do we fit this program into this site and begin to address all of the concerns that Kristen brought up of mass and scale and all of those important things of how to make this neighborhood feel like a neighborhood. So Charlie, I'm going to let you do the heavy lift.
Thanks, Laura. So we'll talk about evolution of site plan first as a kind of a precursor to talk about articulation of the building. But I think a lot of this hits at the heart of how we try to address the guidelines. So some of the highlights are from the previous where we left off with the feasibility study. You can see this is a 4-bay garage. I want to highlight the width of the building or depth of the building north to south here coming off the river. Our biggest changes since the feasibility study were to look at a 3-bay garage. When we get into the ability to recess portions of the facade, do those material changes, stepping back of mass, we needed that elbow room on the north and south of the building. This also goes to some of the parking guidelines where we're really trying to shield the garage. We can't do that if we can't wrap it. And so going to the 3-bay garage, the way we accomplished this was sinking a portion of it into the site and adding a level. So one of your questions earlier was how many levels does it have? We have 4 covered levels and then parking on the roof. One of those levels is submerged. These levels are not synonymous with floor-to-floor height. So when we look at our perspective images today, you'll see that wrapping the building is 2- and 3-story structures. Those don't correlate to the garage behind it. We're able to go less in some areas on the ground level, a little bit more. So in making this a 3-bay garage, you can see north to south, the garage itself is taking up a lot less depth there off the river. This gave us additional setbacks off of the river trail. Again, to that kind of pedestrian access, it gives a secondary kind of pedestrian circulation for really the public, but also residents of this building. It also allows us to more comfortably approach streetscape there on Black Bear. So a little bit of front lawn or boulevard with street trees, similar to something you're seeing in the residential neighborhoods. So this is our lower level plan. What I want to focus in on is what we're calling our ground level plan. So really, this is the second level of the garage. This is more or less on grade as you cross the river on Mahoney. And this is where we're having the transit center, a shuttle turnaround, and entrance into the garage. So to the greatest degree possible, we are trying to either be very intentional, functional with these driveways and also, minimize their presence or at least contain them to just a couple areas so that, again, we can wrap the building as much as possible. That gives us the greatest opportunity for articulation and depth change, material change, and just shielding the garage. This is a representative upper floor plan. So for the garage, we really just have 2 levels that cantilever over top of the transit center. And what was driving this is that's how we need to get to our parking count. So a lot of our back and forth was making sure we're still getting enough room at the east side of the site to get our streetscaping in, align safe pedestrian crossings, and still have room to also improve streetscape, sidewalk, et cetera, on the other side of Black Bear and Mahoney from this new structure. And then On the west side of the structure, I want to call attention to the creation of pedestrian connections from the river trail through to the residences on the south of Black Bear. Right now, if you were to go on site, that existing surface lot comes a lot closer to these Shandoka buildings on the west side. So regaining that a lot of that space, giving it back to the public, and again, leaving us enough room to provide some building articulation and step back vertically into the garage as we conceal that. So I'm just going to run you around the building counterclockwise here with just some more pedestrian level views. This is coming across Mahoney Drive over the bridge. What you're seeing in the foreground is the vehicle entrance into the commuter portion of the garage. So this is entering onto the second level of the garage. You can see in terms of what's wrapping it, not all of this is functional building space behind it, but it's meant to look like that. So again, concealing the garage through screening, through, as the guidelines would say, rooms. Some of that is functional at the transit center. And then as you go west along the river, this is representative of some of the residential massing. So we'll get into some other views with that, where I'll talk a little bit more about the approach there. This is a view kind of straight down that secondary pedestrian access through the site. The berm kind of conceals the river trail. We believe that none of the kind of plantings that are creating kind of that dense coverage of the river trail would be affected by the project. And then you can start to get an idea for some of the kind of step backs off the river trail, ground level up to second and stepping back more with third. And then what we're looking at is using our vertical circulation to spread units apart and create those little courtyards, planted areas between some of the residential units, so that that's not just stacked together, creating more density without any sort of breakout along the length of the building. Also looking at a variety of materials, variety of roof forms. I think one of the things where we'll definitely want feedback is, are there unifying elements, details, materials, or as we look to break up this facade, do we really want to kind of treat each of these sections as if they were separate buildings, knowing there's a garage behind all of these that's unifying them regardless? So this is our northwest corner coming off of the river trail. So just kind of opposite of where the camera view is that pedestrian bridge, looking back to some of the Shandoka buildings. One of the other kind of strategies we've been thinking about is that idea of each building face might have a unique character, one to the other, in leaning into different vernaculars in doing that to create some variety. So could we be doing too much, too little? That's again something we want to talk about today. Again, knowing that this is concepts and not highly articulated drawings at this point. This gives you an idea, kind of looking north towards the river. We've got some of the Shandoka buildings on the left. As we mentioned, some of the other uses other than parking and residential could potentially be daycare. So this is just a view of what that might look like with daycare on a ground level with dedicated outdoor space that's required with daycare licensing. So just kind of giving that sense of scale of what you could do with a park space like this. This is that turnaround. Sorry, was there a question?
No, I was coughing.
No.
Okay. Sorry about that. So this is looking east along Black Bear. So from a height perspective, really pushing to keep it, almost mirroring the other side with the existing buildings there. Not necessarily mirroring all the character elements, materials, but with the massing and scale, having something really familiar wrapping the garage there. This is the opposite of view of that, looking west down Black Bear. So this is majority of this is residential use wrapping the garage on the south side of the structure. Similar approach to the north side in terms of breaking up units and spaces between units with landscaped areas and vertical circulation kind of courtyards there. This is right where Mahoney turns the corner, catching a glimpse of where the shuttles make the loop coming out of the space. You get a little bit of a sense for the streetscape, the ability to do some street trees plantings, and then the widened sidewalk, so 10 feet, kind of hugs the whole south side of the site, wraps around up, connects you over the Mahoney Bridge back to the trail there for residents. And this is another conversation area. We have the transit center that is more of a commercial use, and looked at the potential of a commercial treatment there. Certainly that could be maybe more reminiscent of some of the other architectural forms, materials around here, but wanted to put that out there for conversation as a commercial use, as a public use. Do we draw some attention to it as such and kind of lean on consistency with our streetscape and pedestrian circulation to tie it to the rest of the neighborhood context? Here you can see in maybe a little bit more detail some of those screening elements of the garage where we can bring in a variety of screening materials, also the potential to do some plantings there if we can find something that works in that environment there. There's a couple examples around town where it looks to be working well. And then this is just back to that first corner view. So this is looking south on Mahoney, Cimarron, kind of in the foreground left there. So really kind of careful attention to alignment of pedestrian crossings there coming out of the garage and trying to limit interactions with the cars that are coming in off of Mahoney. So the greatest degree possible, reducing those conflicts. And then we wanted to end on some of these views of the overall elevations. I do want to note that especially on the north elevation, we've, at least for this graphic, turned off all of the vegetation that would be in the berm and along the river trail, just so you can see the building and we can discuss the building and how it's working. But this starts to give an idea of some of the variety of roof forms, limiting some of the lengths of facades and changing those up. It also kind of more clearly illustrates some of those small courtyards between some of the units. And you can also see in this, the south and the north elevations are fairly similar in terms of the residential treatment. We want to we don't want to imply that this is by any means final, other than that there's just a variety and stepping of forms, materials, kind of step back at second and third floors, and just one way to potentially approach that. The next one is just more the kind of head-on views of the east and west. So again, with the east in the middle of the structure here, that's our transit center, our bus loop on the left, and then the commuter lot entry on the right coming off of Mahoney. And then on the west elevation, our neighborhood park in the foreground, and then the architectural treatment behind it, ground floor being a mix of potential commercial use or daycare and upper floors, then again going towards residential units. So we didn't want to kind of belabor our presentation, and just wanted to get through this quickly and get to the discussion portion of that, because this is a first stab, as Kristen mentioned, with just a handful of opportunities to discuss with her and other city staff, and know that a lot of work to be done, and want to do it with y'all.
Yeah, now, Charlie, I think that actually ending on these elevations is a good point where we can also illustrate. I just wanted to briefly point out that creation of these streetscapes, that the care that went into those safe pedestrian crossings and separating the vehicle transit from the pedestrian transit, but then really that residential character along Black Bear, and that those separations that went into those, and that widening of the south side there on Shandoka, or Shandoka on the south side, and then really that creation of those spaces that you're showing there along Black Bear, that was a big part of this creation of the neighborhood, because that begins to be that experience, that separation of the street widths, the kind of sidewalks, then really that ability for snowplow, snow storage, that a lot of that sizing and distances went into this as well. And then how that changes, that more natural character that you see there along the river in the elevation just up there, that's a different approach, that how it relates to the pocket park. And then, as Charlie pointed out, that streetscape there along the east elevation on Mahoney. Again, those distances, sizing of sidewalks, sizing of tree line, and really having those setbacks feel like that appropriate two-sided neighborhood experience streetscape. So just wanted to end with that thought as we get your feedback.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the nice thing about this is more freewheeling. We'll get to the public after we ask our questions and go through this. But are there questions you'd like to go through with the applicant, or even suggestions right out of the box? And I'll try to record the highlights here of the, hopefully there's less than 6 to 8 leave behinds the feedback, because we got to focus mostly on mass and scale, and of course open space. Who would like to go first? I have 6 questions. You want me to go? Stacy, you want to go?
Well, I always go first.
Well, then please.
Because I'll go first. But I probably won't get to everything, because I thought, first of all, staff did a really good job of picking out the pertinent guidelines that I think we all would have focused on. I will reiterate, as I have on several recent meetings, I think mass and scale being number 23 is a disservice to mass and scale. It should be probably 4. I think that's where the most of our comments will center. I'll just jump right into it. Right there, 23A, a third story may be considered if it is set back. By my count, the whole thing is 3. I think there's maybe a 1 story on one corner. There might be a token 2 with a third above it. There's a 4th story in there, a tower in there, on one corner. I think that 3rd story needs to substantially set back, and that will undoubtedly cost parking spaces on the upper levels. So be it. The guidelines are the guidelines. Moving on down to D, it's sort of the same things, including some 1 or 2 story elements at the sidewalk or alley edges. E, this one will be problematic for a parking garage, I understand, but it's still in the guidelines. Lots should be developed with several buildings on large lots rather than a single structure to help the perceived scale of the project. I do appreciate that on the elevations, there's been an attempt to make this seem as though it's a conglomeration of individual buildings along the facade edge. there's been a gesture towards stepping those forms in and out, back and forth. It's just, for me, it's not enough. The parking garage, look, I get it. Parking's all about efficiency and simplicity, but a giant rectangle doesn't serve to provide any significant step backs or variation in the facade. I mean, no scale, no real quarter inch or even eighth inch. I mean, I think we're probably looking at 32nd inch drawings. I'm not quite sure, but these look to me to be 3, maybe 4-foot steps. They need to be probably along a facade that's that length, more in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 to 10 feet in some places. The area between buildings should contribute to the overall positive open space. Don't see that at all. So anyway, that's mass and scale. There's more. I could keep going. I, a larger building. It does say maybe. It doesn't say should be, but it says maybe divided into modules. I think again, there's been that attempt on the facade. And I understand what that does to the parking configuration, but sometimes the guidelines aren't necessarily written specific to the building. Anyway, that's mass and scale, which I feel is like the most important thing, even though it's number 23. Then there's AC5, which is not insignificant. Respect the established town grid. I don't see much of an attempt here to reestablish a grid. I did like how the guidelines speak about it. And sorry, I'm not gonna be able to pull it out real quick unless I get lucky, but, oh, here we go. The historic plat should be expressed. Now, I'm not quite sure what the historic plat in this particular lot was, but it says when feasible, landscaping, building location, landscaping and lighting, even as a ghost image where the actual streets do not conform to the grid. I'd like to see some attempt at reinforcing the grid that is what makes Telluride Telluride. Even though that doesn't exist currently, I think that would go a long way towards establishing this as its own important area. So that's AC5. AC6 pedestrian scale talks a lot about mini parks, developing paths within. I'll just share, this is kind of off on an aside, but you guys will have to help me out. The building where the Strong House is has a path through the middle of it. I love that pathway. It gives me a chance to get off of Oak Street, through that nice little, the transfer warehouse, to get through that little corridor, walk through there, it's quiet, and then you're back out on the street again. It's just a cool little not lost, but it's a cool little respite from the busyness of everything else around it. And I'm imagining myself living out in the bunkhouse or the tiny homes or the bunkhouse and having to walk a block, 2 blocks, a block and then another block around this building with no path through it. Well, there's a path through it, but it's walking through a parking garage anyway. Should I keep going? Then the River Park corridor does start to talk about some things that are probably somewhat secondary to mass scale, these other things, but it does reinforce that tall buildings and forums should be set back. And I think the building itself may be set back, but it doesn't step back on that 3rd level. And the one policy that wasn't mentioned is bicycle systems. I encourage everyone to walk by this site currently and look at the 2 garage or bicycle parking sheds. There are literally 100 bicycles spilling out on all 4 sides. And I see a little blue bike corner on the far north east of the site, which I guess is going to replace the 2 sheds that are near Shandoka now. It's insufficient. What's there now is insufficient, and this is half of what's there now.
And they're showing across the street of Black Bear, bike parking and trash. I don't know how they can do that. It's not on the property, but that's
Well,
not my problem.
at any rate, I know bicycle systems
You're right.
in the scope of things is still number 7. It's higher than number 23, but anyway, I digress. That's what I got for now.
I'll jump in. First of all, thanks to the applicants, great presentation. You guys have a difficult task in front of you. I'll echo everything that Stacy mentioned. Kristen did a great job of highlighting these design guidelines. I personally highlighted about half of the ones she has in there that I think the building is just ultimately massively out of scale with anything in town. Looking at it on a map of Telluride, the only footprint that's larger is the high school. It's larger than the high school ball fields. It's 2 or 3 times the size of the recent Voodoo project. So I cannot get around the fact that it is so massive. I appreciate the articulation attempts, at least as we're seeing in the renderings, around all 3 sides. I would say that the eastern side, the architecture seems inconsistent with anything that we have in town. So I would encourage the applicant to sort of apply some of the forms and the vernacular from the other 3 elevations to the Mahoney streetscape. But I feel this project fundamentally has to be broken up into much smaller elements, components, and I understand that's quite difficult with the parking structure, but it's just grossly incompliant with design guidelines.
I would like to go on the east elevation, particularly. It has a very commercial feel to it. I know there's nothing residential there. It's the garage that you're looking at, and they've broken it up, but it still has that character of a main street that just doesn't fit there.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, storefront probably isn't the vernacular that needs to be there.
Right. And I think I do appreciate them trying to break it up and considering what little bits you have of residential pieces there, but still it does need to be broken up. And I think somehow deal with the 3rd level setback to reduce that scale, particularly along the river trail side. I'm really concerned about that. I use it a lot and like to see that have a much more broken up scale to it.
There's some other things that I wouldn't expect us to get into these things in a preliminary. So don't just take this as me being forward looking. There's an opportunity, I think, on that upper level. Right now, it's not covered at all for some creative, photovoltaic solar. I see a really tiny snow area on the the northwest corner. That's probably not sufficient for I don't know how many spaces, 900 divided by 5. For that many parking space surface, a little tiny snow storage area is probably not sufficient, but some covering there, some way to maintain, to hold some snow until it naturally melts would probably be a good idea. And would that add to height? Maybe, but unless it's in the center of the lot. I mean, there's a lot of directions to go here. And I understand this is preliminary. We can't expect you to develop an entire project at this stage, but yeah.
Let's just keep going down the road because I have questions and I'll comment at the end. Any comments related to what's been said or add to?
Well, I'm in agreement so far with what everybody else has already mentioned. One of the things I would just like to see more is just how the traffic's just going to impact this area. And as everyone's mentioned, I am very empathetic to the applicant and what they're trying to do. But I think in order to get 900 something parking spaces in over there and to be compliant with our design guidelines is an extremely difficult process. And so I'm just sitting here trying to think of solutions on how we can make something like this work and kind of meet both sides of it. And for that top level, for the roof parking, was that heated or is that gonna be plowed?
To the applicant?
That would be plowed.
To be plowed.
I feel like that surface is going to be highly visible, you know, from the gondola and from the ski runs that face that. There needs to be some, again, at the risk of adding mass and scale and height, there's got to be something,
Some articulation of
some articulation of that plane so it doesn't look like an asphalt parking or a football or an asphalt field of sorry, a Walmart parking lot.
Yeah, even possibly maybe some green space up there. You know,
Well, I don't know how you're gonna plow with all the cars, but I think they're gonna have to heat it, but that's a detail.
And the prioritization of uses here is not, as a HARC member, my purview. But breaking that up with some residential on that top level, right? They have great views. Perhaps some of them could be free market, right? Help fund the project. I mean, there's a lot of direction here that could be taken. It would require some creative thinking, but.
Okay, Andrew and Lisa, anything else?
I also agree with largely what Stacy and Matt and everything what has been said so far, and I think generally breaking the project into multiple perhaps units might help it comply a little bit closer to our guidelines, especially with mass and scale and pedestrian friendly friendliness. So maybe that's another, it's a little bit of a different approach to what you guys are trying to do. And maybe something worth exploring at this stage of schematic design for you guys. And as Matt said, you guys should, you know, as he said, encouraging you to study the vernacular styles of our town. I would encourage you to do the same. So that's what I have to say.
I think the big picture is that the architect's client, well, the architect has been handed in, I'm not going to say, I'm going to say impossibility for this particular program with a number of units, a number of cars, and still comply with it. And that's what Matt was alluding to. But my question, since it's a work session, are trying to figure out, well, in what ways could you? Just, it's my only chance, because once we get in the hearings, and by the way, I want to plead with you to try to get this right, rather than, you know, some people say death by 1,000 cuts and have 3 or 4 hearings and then have to get the town manager's permission for a 4th hearing. Let's get this right out of the box. And you can see the unanimity of this board, and who has the oath to be blind to the applicant and enforce the guidelines. And that's what we intend to do. So here's some questions. First of all, is it full below ground parking, or how many feet? What's that height below? And this is going to lead to a positive suggestion here, but how many feet below ground is this one complete level?
So a few notes on that. As we go from east to west, the site drops around 6, 7, 8 feet, depending on where you're measuring from. So at the low point on the west side, we're estimating that we'll be sunken into grade about 3 to 4 feet. And then on the upper side near Mahoney, that's sunken about 10. Now we have some geotech reports from adjacent projects that will need to get refreshed for this one, but certainly need to be conscious of groundwater there. So right now that kind of 3 feet on the low side is what we think is kind of comfortable before you're hitting groundwater.
So unlike the town's project at Silverjack, you're not fully underground parking on that lower level.
Yeah, about like half of it is, fully submerged, or it's really kind of this section right
Okay.
here.
But
Yeah.
but I assume like all the private developers, you could use raft foundations and do at least one story completely underground and get some of this parking off of the roof and allow maybe for more affordable housing units. That's where kind of I'm going with this.
Yep.
But then I'm going to ask the next question, because any other municipality would be looking at 2 stories underground. And I realized the raft foundations, and this is I'm sure you're in the water at 6 feet, probably. But this is the only time we'll discuss. I'm just saying why not consider, like other resort towns, 2 underground floors of parking, and we can get rid of all this mass and scale discussion right now at this meeting. And of course, you're going to say cost, but I mean, in what ways could you put 2 stories underground or a story and a half and put some of those cars deeper down? I don't think you want to answer that, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say that is definitely something we will take back.
Okay, let's move on. Why not put more in the concentration of the, and then I'm going to get to a really big picture question in a second, which I need the board's help with. And could you blow up that top elevation there? But
Yep.
why not put more, and this won't show it, you've got a lot of housing on the north and south, but it's kind of tempered on the east and west. And I guess where the transit entry is, that steals all that space, but you couldn't get any more units on the other end. It doesn't work. Didn't seem like it, unless I missed it, that it was completely
On
north
which
and
end?
on the east, south, and east and west.
On the
Well,
east and west?
East
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
limited.
We were really looking to preserve that a park area, a meaningful park area. And by creating that distance from those existing units of really pushing that building farther back. So there
Okay.
was a lot of discussion as we did push and pull that end, but we felt that open space piece was really critical for that neighborhood that currently doesn't have green space.
Okay, that's a good reason.
And I think that elevation, the neighborhood park elevation, is probably one of the most articulated ones
Yeah.
in the project. And,
for sure.
and to me is
Okay.
the best.
And then,
Real quickly, I did notice, it jumped out at me, I did underline it. Kristen didn't necessarily add this to her list of in the open space section, but it does say at the end of sort of the intro, undeveloped land that is left over after a building is placed on a site is usually insufficient to function as positive open space. This struck me, it's nice. But it seems to me like it's just the westerly portion that's left over after the parking, after you reach 900 spaces.
I would agree with that. I think it would be
Guys,
much.
we can go back to the first plan. We can take up the whole thing.
And yeah, and then I'll just reiterate, the word within or between is used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in the positive open space guideline. Within or between, and this isn't that.
okay. So another question is, you assumed all 288 cars from Carhenge would have to come in here, but surely it would be reasonable to assume that there'll be some underground parking in that development for the affordable housing over there. I mean, it's just the responsible thing to do. And I know they're in the water table, and just like the private developers right next door in these other buildings, they have underground parking where they use raft foundations. So it's time to bite the bullet and say, well, why would you need to use all 288? Why wouldn't you consider, let's say, half of them would be, and this helps with mass and scale. Oh, yes.
So, right. The Carhenge development, all of the parking built on that site will be for the structures that will be built there. So there's not gonna be like extra parking for commuters.
Okay,
So it'll be for the residents.
okay.
Yeah.
Moving on. And by the way, well, let's move
Quickly, I'm gonna have to accept at some point that whatever number given to us has been vetted, worked out, hammered upon. I don't feel like as a HARC member, I'm in a position to decide whether 600, 700, 800, 900, 1,000 is the number. If 900 is the number that other entities have handed us, then we'll make the mass and scale
Fine.
work if we can.
We're driving by that and drive into those.
And again, I'll say it because it came up in almost all the public comment letters.
Yeah.
Certainly there will be a traffic study and that's important, but it's not my purview as a HARC member to consider neighborhood impacts on traffic flow.
On that top elevation there, I think that's the one where there are, yeah. I'd like to go to a different one, but there were. And then I'm gonna ask the big question. I'm gonna look at these drawings aren't labeled, but it's the 3D view of Mahoney. Okay, and so what I see are adding the mass and scale significantly. There you go. As you go down to the right, you see that big appendage. It's 3 stories sticking out. Or even beyond that. Yeah, right there. First of all, as Stacy said, it needs to be set back, but there's appendages at 2 stories in front of it. And there's another spot further to the right on the arrow, I guess it's the west, would be that are appendages that just keep adding the mass and scale. So those need to be removed and the 3rd floor set back. But let's go back to that top rendering.
Mark, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I'm a little lost on it.
Okay, I'm talking about that appendage on the right. You can't see it behind the trees. There's another view that isn't hidden as much by the trees.
Yeah. Yeah, we can hold on.
There are 2-story appendages. There are 2 of them along that side that just keep adding the mass and scale even further.
Or it's stepping down.
Stepping down is the way I
Yeah.
would.
You're talking there and
See.
over the one,
I think that particular rendering view is a little unfortunate, the way it seems that it's pronounced, but the
Well,
other views make it seem like these are.
well, I think they need to step back on that 3rd story, but I think these need to be eliminated because it's just adding to the mass and scale out front. It's not accomplishing. I mean, and it's coming closer to the river trail and which they wanted to avoid. But here's my big picture question. You know, everybody is saying we can't, the guidelines say 50-foot runs. Okay, you got parking in the middle of this, which you're trying to hide and disguise, which I appreciate. And plus get more affordable housing units on any project we do. But I mean, it seems like there's 2 choices. You could, put 2 stories underground or 1.5 stories, or you could divide this into 2 parking garages that almost have a 20-foot or a 30-foot corridor between the buildings and separate these buildings. I actually drew lines in here with help from the guidelines of 3 building separations on this long. How many feet long is that, Matt? I think maybe from your measurement. I mean, it's
Let's ask the applicant because.
yeah. How many feet long is this?
600, 500 feet long.
What is that?
Yeah, the garage is 284 feet long.
284 foot long. I mean, and here we are supposed to be every 50 feet having a break. So, but I might be persuaded in this neighborhood, if it was divided in half, the building, and there was like 20 feet of open park area between this massive. Well, actually, that garage is 284 foot long, but how long is that elevation from the end of the housing units to the other end, going east to west? How long is
Yeah,
that?
that adds another 20 feet.
Oh, is that all?
Yep.
Okay, well, still, it's 304 feet, 304 feet. So you could divide it up and have a parking garage left and right, but they're separated and you lose about probably 3 stories of, above ground. It depends if you have 2 stories underground, but you'd have at least 3 stories you lost, probably 50 parking spots. You'd have to figure out how to gain. So without break, okay. Let's see if I have any other questions. No. So, let's hear from the public and then let's try to galvanize around what we would suggest to do with the guidelines and working with Kristen to bring this back as something that's viable and not so far off, Matt used the word, it's grossly oversized, and it's because you're dealt with a program that needs to be adjusted somehow. And, maybe there's another place for a smaller garage like Silverjack somewhere in one development, but anyway. And we can come back to our dialogue, but let's hear from the public. I want to get these, I've got your letters here. We've all read them. Come up one at a time and then electronically raise your hand if you're out there. Please, 3 minutes or less. And if somebody in front of you says the same thing, say, the next person get up and say, I concur, and add your twist to it. Please, read your name.
My name's Kristen Permakoff. I live in Entrada. I live at the west end of town. And my biggest question is, why can't you split the parking between Parhenge and Shandoka? Because all of those people in that parking structure are going to be walking through the driveway of Cimarron to get to the ski lift. So you're taking parking away from the ski lift and you're putting housing there where there should be parking there. So why couldn't you just do 2 parking structures, one on Parhenge, one on Shandoka, and then split the traffic flow, split the people going to the lift? This is all contingent on a lift, I'm assuming, right? Because if there's no new lift, and do we really need this big of a parking structure? That's the question if they're out there. Minimizing the roof angles too, that you guys have all those roof angles, they create ice dams and then they leak into people's houses. So, I've experienced that firsthand and it's unfortunate, but the snow storage, where it goes, is it going to go onto the river trail or onto the pedestrian zones or into the open space zones? Or that was a question. And yeah, and there are a lot of birds on those trees, so I'm really happy to try to keep those trees on that berm. Thank you for your time.
Ben?
Ben Jackson, town resident. I don't want this to be a hindsight project. I can sort of go back in the 37 or so years I've lived here. They do seem big and large when they're first presented, but we can go back to, oh my gosh, the depot having a hotel that's 40 feet tall. It's too big. We've got $15 million homes there. We've got, do we need to condemn all the valley floor? Should we peel a little bit off, for some housing around the shell? Hindsight, it's great to look back 2020. You're looking at this for the next 30 years. Telluride's not going to get any less busy. You got $1 billion project going in the village. And, this piece of property in Carhenge are probably 2 of the most valuable piece of properties in all of ski country. We also need to keep in mind where these people are going to work. So hotels, free market condominiums, it's going to pay for most of this. Mark, I love your idea about suppressing this. Vail is what, 3 stories underground? And I like to compare us to Vail, but we have got, these are guidelines, and we're going to have to get our head around this, because the decision that you guys are going to make in the town, that's going to be with us for 30 years. And we don't want this to be a hindsight project, because we're going to need this. We're not going to need it next week, but in 5 or 10 years, we're going to need 700 to 900 units of parking. And put some free market, in this building, put more free market on Carhenge where it's ski in, ski out, put more of the deed restriction down here. This is more just philosophical, but we don't need this to be yet another hindsight project that Telluride thinks is too big for them. And then, we're stuck with nowhere for these people to park that are going to continue to come here, and we're going to continue to get busier and grow. And the people that live, I've got a condo down there that I rent out. It's a tight urban area. We've got the mesas that are a lot less dense. If this is getting a little too elbow to elbow for you, you can always sell and move out to Wilson Mesa and have all the birds and butterflies and pixie dust you'd like. But this has to go here. So thank you. And thank everyone for their voluntary time.
Thank you. Please.
Hi, I'm Cami Nichols. You all got my statement and I know you've read it on behalf of the Tier 7 Community Coalition, and I appreciate you all reading what we had to say. And I know HARC's purview is not to decide number of spaces. You're just looking at the project presented to see how you can fit it into your guidelines. And I get that. And I think that's going to be a Herculean task. I agree that mass is a big issue, and everything else that you all have talked about, and I appreciate it. I think underground parking is a potential solution, and I know we're talking to the client maybe more than to the architect now, but consider underground parking on Carhenge and consider underground parking on Shandoka, and then you're not putting all this new parking in the Shandoka lot, because that's a big ask to try to make a 900 parking space parking garage fit the HARC guidelines and fit the community and fit the town. And if the 300 extra spaces is for day use, you know, there's the Mountain Village has the gondola parking garage that they built purposely. They can add 2 more levels to that garage. So if we're talking about 300 more spaces for skiers, it makes a lot more sense to put them out there. So, you know, I'm just throwing it out there more to the client than to you all. I understand that, but as you're struggling going forward with this project, if it looks like it's impossible, I think that may be true. And we would like to consider everybody, you know, encourage everybody to be creative and consider going back to the drawing board a bit. Take our time and do it right. So thanks all. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
You're listening.
Anybody on?
Anybody want to raise their hand? Here we go. Here they come.
Frederick.
They're lining up. Frederick Bruno, please, unmute yourself and 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. And you can't see my video, I guess, because I can't do that either. Well, anyway, I live in Double Diamond and I've been there for about 25 years. I think the biggest concern that I'm hearing, and I've been on the board of Double Diamond for a long time. The biggest concern I hear in the neighborhood is, number one, people cutting through our courtyard, Cimarrons, and the other one is the height. And I'd like to talk about that. It seems to me that if it's going to be 4 stories plus a roof, and the average deck to deck height of a parking ramp is about 12 feet deck to deck. So that's going to be a 60-foot structure, more or less. Now, why I think that's important is for this reason. I noticed that the criteria that the town put forth say that that public view corridors will be protected, will be preserved. And that's good. But then the second criteria after that says views, quote unquote, through private properties are not protected. Now, that's a false statement of law, because in Colorado, we have what are called prescriptive or adverse easements protecting the view of our property. This behemoth parking ramp, as you propose, is going to compromise the Down Valley views and the Red Rock views of people in Etta, Cimarron, Double Diamond, Shandoka, and Sundance. And people who have been there for the appropriate amount of time, it's either 10, 15, or 20 years. I'm not sure, but they have an enforceable right to protect their view. And I know that the Down Valley views in that area are naturally straight over Shandoka. And now I'm wondering if the town has in their criteria have any thoughts on protecting private views, which have been established by adverse easements, or if the developer is going to be sensitive to the views of people living all of a sudden with a completely obstructed view of Down Valley and Red Rocks. Thank you.
Thank you. Madeline White, please, and unmute yourself.
Hello, thank you for the presentation today. I just wanted to ask one question about the open space that's going to be to the west of the parking structure. Can somebody tell me what the size of that is? like the width of that park? Because sometimes on paper, things look really big, but then in reality, they're a lot smaller.
In a normal hearing, we're not allowed to have interaction. However, I'm making a note, and when the applicant gives their rebuttal, I'm going to ask them to answer your question.
Oh, well, thank you very much. The other thing I just wanted to say that I do agree with the committee that the mass and scale is pretty darn large. The density kind of overwhelming, especially for that area. And I do like the idea of underground parking. I think that's could be a great solution. And I do agree with what Kristen said earlier is, can't half of the parking stay on this lot and half of the parking be on the Carhenge lot, and you can get more housing on if you didn't have such a high amount of parking on the Shandoka lot. So thank you for putting on this presentation. Appreciate it.
Okay. Anybody else? Electronically, please raise your hand.
No other hands raised.
Okay. So would the applicant like to respond to some of these comments? And particularly, I would ask you to just give us all the mention of that park or the open space.
Yeah, so let's see. It really depends on where you measure it, but 80 to 120 is kind of the variety in there. At our narrowest point here at the north, we're a little closer to 70. I think we're looking at around a third of an acre, depending on where you cut it for that park.
Okay. You say a third of an acre?
Charles, can you confirm that? That's what you said earlier. But yeah, I think so.
Roughly. Okay. That's about right. Okay. So, you could put the south elevation back up there.
Sure.
We're going to try to boil this down. First of all, I got to ask a question, because if we're going to give them some guidance here, and we're not trying to design it, but it's a work session, so we can be more free flowing to help see, any input we might have or ideas to make it viable. So would the board think that if this was, of course, 2 stories underground parking would make all my questions go away. Not 3 stories like Vale, and not 3 stories like Steamboat, or I think Aspen has a 3-story garage, but 2 or 1.5. But would the board think that if this building was cut in half, this 304-foot run, and there was like a 30-40-foot gap in here, so it was 2 complexes, and they'd have 2 garages that were separate from each other. I guess they could, at least the above ground, 2 below ground could be fully viable. Would that be enough to break up this whole 304-foot run? Would you think in this zone district, or would we say that the guidelines would say, well, they do say every 50 feet have a break, but that doesn't mean necessarily cutting all the way through.
Cutting all the way through, yeah.
But with one break in the middle, cutting off of 304 feet, or we can give them something, would that satisfy us with a 30-foot open space, the traffic, the cut through for, people walking, green space, losing 50 cars. Of course, if you have 2 stories underground, you wouldn't lose 50 probably, and it'd be 2 separate garages inside this then, which, is inefficient construction, but is that enough of a break? I'm just trying to see what we could give them as far as guidance.
I was sitting here trying to both listen to public comment and kind of get ready for this summary part of this. And I don't want it to seem like I'm just cherry picking a few of the guidelines, because I'm just trying to not read the entire guideline, the whole section, but that could solve a few of my highlighted items. One, in the intro, it talks about as being seen from a distance, the treatment area should be part of the community with essentially the same for street and alley arrangement, building forms, and scale of development. Splitting that might help get closer to that ideal that that guideline describes. In positive open space, it talks about where many projects, well, sorry, where was I? What was the other one? Oh, sorry, this is in pedestrian scale. A building should step down along the street. So,
There's a lot of guidelines.
well, there's a lot of guidelines that say kind of the same thing, but there are at least 3 that talk about breaking large projects into modules, essentially.
So I'm asking, could this be enough? 30, 40 foot open space in there.
With just one break?
So, well, then there'd be 2 garages. If you break it 3
Right.
times, then
Yeah.
they're never gonna be able to.
Well,
That will work.
Yeah.
yeah, it's still got to function.
Or you can just put 2 stories underground. We can quit
It's
talking.
still gonna be, still 2 big masses.
Yeah,
You know.
it is.
And is it out of
But there's
proportion to
3rd floor
everything else there?
setbacks. I mean, an elimination of these 2-story element. I'm just asking.
If you could
You gotta
get
tell them something.
garage below, so the parking garage isn't as high, you could do some stepping with the residential structures around it. And that might be sufficient.
Hey, Mark, can I say something?
Yeah, Kieran, please.
Yeah, I forgot I was here too. Um,
I did. Okay.
Good one.
We love you. Go ahead.
It's all good. I'm not there. It's fine. What I was going to say is with regard to your specific question, because I would co-sign everything that's been said so far with regard to what HARC has said. If you split it into 2, I would have to really see how the treatment of the various facades look in terms of the modulation of the building fronts and whatnot to see if that's going to be workable. It's at least something to work with, where I think if they were to come to a regular meeting with a project at this scale, it would probably be more efficient for us just to deny it and have them start over with a different concept. So I think splitting it into 2 with a substantial gap between the 2 is at least could provide a runway depending on how that looks.
I would agree with Kieran 100%.
Okay, so I'm gonna read down the takeaways and help me add to this. Number 1 was consider.
You're echoing.
Sorry. Consider 1.5 to 2-story underground parking to help solve this massive scale issue and maybe leave room for more affordable housing units. Like some on the top, maybe they don't want free market because there'll be some free market probably over in Carthage in one of those buildings. But so that's 1 we can all agree with, right? Consider 1.5 to 2-story underground parking. Okay. The on the that's the south elevation that's in front of us, or that's the north elevation in front of us now. Eliminate those 2. There are 2-story appendages. And it's easier for me to show you the drawing that I marked up before the meeting. But I think they know what we're talking about because I went through it once with them.
And it may be moot.
Huh?
It may be moot with the redesign.
It might.
But bringing
Well,
that up
there's
to-
2-story on that north elevation appendages that stick out further, adding to mass and scale. So consider removing those.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that comment. 1, it's hard to tell. I don't feel like these elevations exactly follow the plans that we've got. And there's just not enough information, but I think these 2-story elements help to step the mass and scale down. So I don't know if I'd get into that level of detail if we're asking them to split the project in half and change the levels.
I agree with Matt.
I understand your point. I mean, to me, they need to delete them and then step back to 3rd floor, as Stacy said. It's just, it's getting too close to the river trail and we don't have to give them that now.
Well, and I expect more detail with regards to that later. I mean, what I do see is there's a sidewalk, which I think we're all perceiving as the river trail, but it's not. The river trail is considerably further north than that. I found myself a little annoyed that that viewport wasn't just stretched a little more to the river trail so that I could see it.
Okay. All right. Well,
It's
we're
there if you look hard for it, but
so we're gonna hold on that item. The next item was substantially set back the third stories compliant to the guidelines. Kristen has already cited all the guidelines. We don't have to tell you what they are.
I was trying to just get it down to a page instead of 4.
Yeah. Would we agree that there should be more for the guidelines? More 1 and 2 story elements rather than just little corners.
Yes.
Okay, more 1 and 2 story elements. Kieran, you agree with that?
I do. Thank you.
Just making sure you're still with us. Okay, touche. And go ahead.
In keeping with the idea of maybe perhaps separating into 2 buildings, positive open space, A, create places with distinct identity within, and D, provide positive open space within. It says it twice in the same.
Okay. It's strong. I mean, this is not our imagination. We're not making this stuff up. Okay, and then the last one, the most important one, is break the building on that north elevation into 2 different buildings with 2 different garages.
There's one other thing that we didn't spend much time on, but
Okay,
with
so
regards
that's
to
one.
pedestrian scale, using decks, porches, bays, and balconies, I think I counted 3 or 4 on a project of this size.
Okay,
That certainly helped with the mass and scale and the step
Increase.
backs and everything else.
increase the use of decks. Okay.
It's not a definitive
Porches.
number.
Yeah.
Maybe one might have been hidden behind a tree or something, but
Okay. Okay, and then what about that east end of the building? Everybody said it looked too commercial, but I mean, we're on mass and scale, but do you want to comment on that or not?
I mean, it does want to,
Institution.
it does want to
Downtown.
announce, it's trying to announce itself as a transit hub.
And
It doesn't,
The
it
guidelines-
doesn't want to look.
we don't have that in our guidelines, that we can have a downtown Denver look where the buses and cars come in. I mean, that's not part of this.
I
So,
think I would suggest they look to things like the gondola for unique,
Yeah.
simple solutions to announce that this is a transit hub without copying downtown Denver or anywhere in America. They did ask us to comment on architectural character, whether it should be more the same or more different. I think if they're breaking it up into 2 buildings, I would prefer to see that as 2 totally separate developments, and even that might not be enough. There's still going to be enough mass and scale that each separate structure or collection of buildings might want to be further broken up.
No, I think it will, each unit. I mean, the way they did it, I think that's a good start, the way they did it. Here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one.
Yeah.
yeah,
You know,
build on
and
it.
I think build on that idea.
What you're talking about is an AC 23E.
In several places.
Well, it's again in several places, but it talks about, come on, I was just reading it. Oh, it's in I actually, sorry. Modules should be expressed 3-dimensionally by having significant architectural changes throughout. But then it also says a single form should remain dominant. And I think maybe that's what's missing here. It's too fragmented, which it also says the mass without a single dominant element becomes too fragmented.
I think that comment about a single form was with the mindset of a much smaller project.
Yeah.
I'd also like to suggest that when they come to us next to show us 3-dimensional views of the context of this project with other context around the whole neighborhood context. The views have been carefully chosen to sort of obscure the massing around this project.
I'd like to see shots from the river trail looking back at the building from down at that level.
Pedestrian view.
You know, what am I going to see when I'm walking the dog?
Yeah,
You know,
very important. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so that's 8. Add pedestrian views.
I do have one selfish question. Where are paddle boarders going to unload their paddle boards when they're gonna float the valley
I
floor.
was thinking that too. It'd be nice.
Tell you what, if they get the mass and scale, we'll
Okay.
haul in portable trailers and with air conditioned with.
Oh, well, I don't want,
Ease.
we don't want that.
Okay,
It's always cold.
donate to that cause. Okay,
Why don't you ask them if this, does this help them?
paddle boards?
No, no.
Oh, no.
That was a
The whole thing.
closing.
Your 8
anecdote.
items.
What about them?
If they have any more
Do
questions.
they have any more questions?
Oh,
Are we
okay.
clear? Do they know? what they want
Are
us
we
to
good
do?
with that 8-item input?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, well,
Thank
listen,
you.
this is a tough situation with that program and there's been lots of suggestions and I'm sure town will look at the big picture, what, could you put 800 here, 100 somewhere, whatever. From now on, we're only going to talk about the guidelines and unfortunately, we can't help you anymore. You're on your own and have to get back to Kristen and please come back with meeting
They
suggestions.
should come in with another work session.
Or you could have another work session.
Because this
Because it's so far off, maybe that'd be actually a good idea. And we could cut the number of hearings, might actually work yourself ahead in the schedule. But we're all trying to help, but we're clear and we're unanimous from the outgo, and we don't want to dribble into this. And at the third meeting, decide, well, okay, now we'll do this. So hopefully you take that in good faith and thank you very much. I know it's a bit challenged. So.
We do take it in good faith and really appreciate it. That's why
Okay.
we came today. Thank you.
Thought we'll be done by 7, but we'll be out here by 7:30. I just want to, sorry, Kiernan, I'm doing a handout just because it's been almost 5 months since we had our strategic planning. Would you hand one of these? Just what you published. Yep, here's what you published. As our summary of the meeting action items. And we're gonna go through real quickly and just say, hey, are these things still important to us? I keep bringing these, number one, I keep bringing these note cards. Did somebody give one to Kristen?
Oh,
Yeah.
you got another one?
Yeah, I got a lot.
We can do one more down this way.
No, here. Three more.
One more.
One more? One more? 2 more?
Here.
One more.
No, that's mine. It's all right. Okay, so I keep bringing these note cards and we never use them. So do I still need to bring these note cards? It was for when we got a lot of conditions we pass around and people write down versus, as Piper has told us, summarize first.
Leave them in
I-
Teddy's.
I think you gotta be patient. The last meeting, we had 2 projects with no conditions.
And we had one with 32 not too long ago,
Well,
but we didn't bring out the cards. Well, okay. I don't think it's our priority. There's bigger things to talk about here. Or restate conditions one last time before voting, as Piper has said, and we're getting that done with straw polls, et cetera.
it's a Piper question. Are we, is our direction, is it hard to decipher the motions we make still?
It's so much better than it used to be. You're doing a really good job listening when I asked you to make sure that you all know what you want
Okay.
the conditions to be before it gets seconded. That makes my minutes much easier. So I know that you all, when you deliberate and you scribble down ideas, you've really tightened it up and
Okay.
you're doing very well.
But after all that, you're still going to cheer for the Thunder against my Indiana Pacers. Okay.
It's the threat of the.
Okay. Thanks, Kristen, for incentivizing work sessions. I think you've done a good job on that. Incorporate additional analysis, mass and scale. Now, here's one I got to ask the question. So we've had 2 work sessions and we at the meeting said on February 20th, about 10 a.m., that we wanted to get compliance view from the staff. Right now, and traditionally, before Kristen, it was stating the facts and no recommendation of compliance or saying, no, this is too far out of scale at a work session. Do I want to cross this off? Because I don't want to leave stuff on here that we're not going to do. Or do we want her to go out on a limb and give us her view of compliance before we start these
You're
meetings
talking number 4.
on work sessions? Yeah.
I think it's project specific. If Kristen, Darren have strong feelings about a particular project, they could make that known to us. And if they don't have strong feelings or they want us to form our own opinions, then they don't comment.
Okay. Okay, I don't really care either way.
But I mean, when I was doing this for the town, I would tell people, you know, your mass and scale. You're not even close. And I don't want to take this to the board. Sometimes they insist
Yeah.
that they want the board to tell the client that they can't do it, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But
All right, we'll leave it alone.
that's a tough one to, depends on the project.
Okay.
It really does.
5 was the level of detail with 3D modeling, and I think we're mostly getting that. But in this work session, you can't hold it against them that the plan view did not match the 3D renderings here. We saw that, or Matt saw it. A couple.
Hard to tell, but.
So we're gonna, 6, require 3D, if a project's still substantially non-compliant at the time of the second hearing. In terms of mass and scale, and this is like 5 years old, and there are still 8 to 10 conditions, conduct a straw poll on whether to give further input on mass and scale, or request they just go get with staff and remedy the deficiency. Okay, I think, well, we haven't done that. We had one with 32, but it was on the second round, but everybody good with, if we still run into that after the second time around? Then move them to the back of the line, as we used to say. Okay, unless I hear different, I'm gonna push it that way. We favored the policy of specifying the exact footage, percentage, and dimensions required to comply with the design guidelines at the third hearing. If it's not addressed based on feedback at the first and second, well, we almost have to, because then that's the end. So I guess.
Isn't that, I mean, that's land use code stuff.
Well, it could be design guidelines, like the setback on the,
You
third
need
floor.
to, I think what you're thinking about is that we've encouraged an applicant to set back the third level significantly, and they come back with 8 inches.
Yeah.
Then we can come back and say, no.
Do it at the second meeting, but
Well,
we said the third.
I
do
do want to be as judicious as possible with being that prescriptive.
Okay. 9, required setbacks may only be altered due to compelling and unusual site conditions. That's kind of a standard. But we had that come up about 3 or 4 projects or months ago on a project. 10, if when HARC anticipates covering all meetings by 8:30, it's now 7:26, we might discuss other topics like this one. And then the 7 action items in the back, where HARC will conduct a public outreach seminar in the fall of 2025. Kristen's trying to build up her staff. If you're not ready, then we understand, but it's certainly, I think, needed, but we'll leave that up to you.
Sure.
Preservation Awards, you extended the date. That was a wise move. God, we only have 4.
So far. I can say that there have been a few others who are talking about submitting nominations, and they've spoken with me about that, and they haven't come in yet. So there might be more out there, and just keep encouraging people.
Just tell them, hey, it might be easy to win.
Well, I can tell you that when I was doing those,
Hey, get a
we
trophy.
got 4. That was pretty good.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Keep moving. We'll finish this. Staff participating in CLG meetings, that's not up to us, but that was just an encouragement. Peer group, pending the garnering of grant funding, a historic and architectural survey update in 25 sites, 26. That's gonna be in 26, right? The survey?
Most likely, although it's possible that it could start at like near the end of 25, depending on that grant funding piece. And so, somewhere in that range.
Okay. 5 was the wayfinding project. You had Lindsay come in at the last meeting. My understanding is it's months away for us but I gave her the museum, thanks to Kiernan's list. I went over the Chamber of Commerce, got their list. I gave them to her. I said, here's 22 houses or buildings that need signs, and probably about 6 or 7 of them already have them, but something uniform, et cetera. Okay, 6, the alley watch list, when staff has capacity to take on a project. I still think that's really important before winter, just to designate the 10, 12 that are falling apart and take some action. The town say, hey, put a new roof on it. So we'll keep that as an objective. And then the last one, 7, was we had 3 or 4 land use code determinations that we as a board stumbled into, different interpretations. And we thought, even though the land use code is not being updated till 26, 27, and one of them was site coverage, and there was another one, but I would just encourage staff to see, when you get a window of time, we could maybe after one of these meetings, discuss those 2 I don't think there's 4 or 5, but there was a list of 3. And Darren has it, I have it, not with me. And I think it would be helpful. Anyway. That was it. I hate to go past 7:30.
Oh, no.
You're gonna talk about the survey results?
Just did.
No,
Oh,
well, we already did.
oh, I just want to say I joined the board at the end of 2022.
Well, that's when things started looking. Oh, you, look at that. No wonder.
It's 5.
Is that correlation or causation?
I put 6s down.
Okay, you know what? We need to adjourn this meeting at 7:30. Thank you. What are we gonna do now? Where are we going?
Got an hour left.
The Thunder don't play till tomorrow night.